Hey everybody, here is your latest installment of overview slides on Brave New World. I hope that you're enjoying reading the story. It's really starting to heat up, I think, in terms of our characters and all of that. So many of you have given some good feedback saying that these screencasts do indeed help make you feel a little more plugged back into class, and that you are getting some things out of this. So you asked, here it is. So hopefully this continues to be helpful to you. Our goal today is really to go over chapters 11 to 13 and to consider some of the developments in the context of what Huxley may be saying in his satire. So we're back in the world state. We're with John the Savage as he is experiencing the utopia for the first time. And we're going to just go through a few slides. The work along document that we've seen in the past is posted on the classwork tab. So there are just a few questions for you to complete as you're viewing the screencast, or maybe to go back afterwards and think things through. So here is the different prompts. There are just 6 of them, and there are probably the same number of slides for us to consider today. Okay, so here we go. I hope you're good and ready to go. All right. So the title, Oh Brave New World. Remember, this was a quote from Miranda in The Tempest of Shakespeare. When John first says these words, he is living in squalid poverty in the reservation. He has spent his whole life growing up, nearly 20 years now, listening to his mom talk about how amazing this utopia is, how amazing the world state is, how everyone is happy and healthy and clean, and everything is just the greatest thing ever. So when he says it originally, Oh Brave New World, he is saying it with excitement and optimism. Once he gets into the utopia, right, what happens? He's publicly shamed into, notoriety by his dad, the director, running off into oblivion, never to be heard from again. His mom is off in a Soma holiday stupor prescribed by her doctor, Dr. Shaw, against John's concerns. His mom is getting so much Soma that they anticipate she'll probably be dead within a couple months, but nevertheless, she's happy. So let's just let her go on that Soma holiday. And then literally Bernard is using him as a meal ticket of sorts to become even more popular. And he takes, John on the tour, and it physically sickens John to see cloned human beings, or to see how they're mocking his culture in newsreels that the students are looking at. And so John's tone is going to change from excitement, oh, brave new world that has such people in it, to, oh, brave new world. Yeah, right. Sarcastic. Oh, brave new world. Disgust should be the tone that we hear. And so poor John, for example, when he is on that tour in chapter 11, and they see the geography lesson, and it's the Savage Reservation is a place, this is right from their lesson, is a place which, owing to unfavorable climatic or geological conditions or poverty of natural resources, has not been worth the expense of civilizing. This idea that it's not economically feasible to pursue helping the folks in the Savage Reservation is the ultimate insult. And John asks, but why do they laugh? This is on 162 in your book. Asked the Savage in a pained bewilderment. Why? The provost turned toward him, a still broadly grinning face. Why? Because it's so extraordinarily funny, right? I mean, there's nothing about this world in which John recognizes himself, aside from all of his hopes or his misinterpretations of Linda's stories as he's been growing up. But there is nothing here for him except possibility of a relationship, a friendship. And so we look at John through the eyes of different people here. But one of our characters that we need to keep an eye on is Bernard. So with Bernard, I would ask you to just consider, has he changed? Has he changed? Bernard enjoys his popularity when he returns with John to the world state. He is loving life, right? He has been treated as an outcast his entire life. And now all of a sudden, everyone wants him at their party. Everyone wants to be with him. All of the women find him attractive suddenly. And so he responds by saying, yeah, sure. He sleeps around. He takes Soma. He goes to parties. He's becoming everything that he said he hated in the utopia. And so I want you to really think about this. How does this make you feel about him? Is this his true self coming out? Was everything else that he was all about before just a facade, just a reaction? Well, you don't want me, so I don't want you. Kind of like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, not part of the reindeer game, so I didn't really want to be part of it anyway. But once he has the opportunity to be accepted, does he then show his true self? Can you imagine the temptation he must feel to finally be accepted? I mean, we can be, sanctimonious and proud all day and say, I would never have done what Bernard did. But I mean, if you've spent your whole life feeling like an outcast and then finally be accepted that way, to be someone people want to spend time with, is that something you can be compassionate about? I don't know. I'm certainly disgusted by Bernard's behavior. His treatment of John is really not nice. The way he's treating women, obviously, like meat, like he said he would never do, not nice. And when finally his notoriety ends, when John refuses to be his meal ticket, when he yells at him in Zuni, Aya takwa esotse na, right? Basically saying, Bernard, go to hell. I will not do this for you anymore. Once he cannot deliver John the Savage, then Bernard's popularity goes right back into the tank. People had been looking at Bernard and saying, yeah, his notoriety is going to come to a crashing halt. And they're right. They know. They know he is only getting his 15 minutes of fame, and then he will be yesterday's news, right? So when he does return to his friends, John and Helmholtz, John in particular, says he's glad to see the old Bernard come back. He says, you're more like you were at Malpais. And Bernard, still angry over John's refusal to be his meal ticket, says, yeah, that's because I'm unhappy. And John responds, yeah, well, I would rather be real and unhappy than be fake like you were and quote unquote happy. So it's just interesting to think about Bernard. Think about Bernard's character as you continue in these next few chapters. Has he changed? Is he still the same man? Do we forgive him as John forgives him, as Helmholtz forgives him? I don't know. We'll have to see. So that brings up the topic of friendship in the Brave New World. There seems to be, obviously in the utopia, a limitation on friendship. You can hang out with people, you can hook up with people, but you're never really truly there to understand, as every one of us, I would think, admits to saying, like, it is so great when you find a friend who can truly understand your mind, your heart, your soul, and to appreciate you for who you are. That is a gift. That is such a gift. And so friendship in the Brave New World is really kind of an oxymoron. But when we're dealing with these unorthodox characters like Helmholtz, John, and just to some extent Bernard too, and watching them kind of befriend each other, it's interesting. They're almost doing it against the rules, right? They enjoy sharing their stories and emotions. In particular, Helmholtz has gotten into trouble for writing that jingle about emotions, and he shares it with John, and John listens to it eagerly and appreciates it. And they are befriending each other. Of course, Bernard gets jelly about this. He's watching it, and he's acting like a jerk every time they're sharing these stories, what have you. Bernard is acting, immature, like he's the third wheel and he's not happy about it. And he lets it be known by being immature and interrupting and doing all those things that further probably alienates us from loving Bernard. But even Helmholtz shows a limitation in terms of understanding our savage. When Helmholtz and the savage are sharing stories, and John decides to read from Romeo and Juliet, Helmholtz is trying. He's trying so hard, but he cannot understand romance. He cannot understand tragic love. He cannot understand heartbreak. And he just can't take it anymore. So as John is reading from Romeo and Juliet, where there is in that famous scene where Juliet cries out and she says, "Is there no pity sitting in the clouds that sees into the bottom of my grief? Oh, sweet my mother, cast me not away. Delay this marriage for a month, a week, or if you do not, make the bridal bed in that dim monument where Tybalt lies." She would rather be dead than be separated from her love. When Juliet says this, because John's reading it out loud, remember, Helmholtz, this is how it's described on 184. Helmholtz broke out into an explosion of uncontrollable guffawing. Guffawing is like laughter that's so bad when you just are going nuts with laughing, okay? Like, you're just choking to death, right? He cannot stop. He can't hold it in anymore. He says, Huxley writes, the mother and father, such grotesque obscenities, forcing the daughter to have someone she didn't want, and the idiotic girl not saying that she was having someone else whom, for the moment at any rate, she preferred. In its smutty absurdity, the situation was just irresistibly comical. Helmholtz had managed with a heroic effort to hold down the mounting pressure of his hilarity, but sweet mother, in the savage's tremulous tone of anguish, and the reference to Tybalt lying dead but evidently uncremated and wasting his phosphorus on a dim monument, were too much for him. Helmholtz laughed and laughed till tears streamed down his face, quenchlessly laughed while pale with a sense of outrage. The savage looked at him over the top of his book and then, as the laughter continued, closed it indignantly, got up, and with a gesture of one who removes his pearl from before swine, locked it in a drawer. And so what we want to be thinking about here, friends, is how poor John really has no one, except Shakespeare, maybe, that he feels understands him, understands his heart, understands his emotions, understands what matters to him. So that brings us to chapter 13. Well, actually all throughout, but with Lenina. Let's think about Lenina for a little bit here, friends. Has she changed, Lenina, in your eyes as you're reading? Are you experiencing her any differently than when you first started reading this text? Has she changed? In these chapters, in particular in chapter 12, we see her struggling with her feelings for John. She assumes in chapter 12 that he skips the party because he doesn't like her. He doesn't find her attractive. In chapter 13, at the beginning, Henry is kind of lecturing her. She tells him to shut up when he won't stop. He's telling her maybe she just needs a violent passion surrogate treatment so she'll feel better. She's distracted at work. She is not remembering. I mean, her distraction actually is going to lead someone to die 22 years later because she can't remember, did I inoculate this guy or this embryo or did I not? And so, it's just proof. Huxley gives us proof of how inefficient and how rough it can be to have emotions, right? You make mistakes, you get distracted, you do things maybe that aren't robotic and predictable. And that's the cost of love. She tells Fanny she likes John, and Fanny, being the good utopian girl, counsels her, also to be a good girl, take Soma, and just go take John. If you want him, just take him. And you know probably what that means, right? Lenina, does things like pause to look at the moon. Hello? She does. Remember when when Bernard tried to get her to look at the moon and over the English Channel in the helicopter, and she was refusing. She was not interested in nature whatsoever. She pauses to look at the moon before she steps into the helicopter and flies off with the arch songster. I mean, she is being a good utopian. She's going to have relations with the arch songster, but you know, she's looking at nature. She's having feelings. She doesn't know what to do. She's thinking about John an awful lot. So I'm wondering how you feel about her. So, like with Bernard, is her true self coming out? Is she changing? Is she showing some dynamic characterization here? What's the deal with her? Remember, she is a beta. She is at a disadvantage. She does, um, you know, have limitations on her physically and emotionally that Bernard does not have as an alpha. So it's just interesting to think about her. And of course, she plays a big part in chapter 13 in the big, what I'm calling the big what if. So in chapter 13, I don't know, did you like the chapter? John goes to her and tells her basically, I love you. And when people from my reservation love someone, they try to prove it to them. They kill a mountain lion. They sweep the floors, and everything that he offers as a possible way to show Lenina that he loves her and would do anything for her and wants to marry her, she meets with, but we have vacuum cleaners, and why would you ever kill an animal? And she is completely unable, like zoom, it all goes right over her head. She's unable to understand what John is saying. She's unable to process really what's behind his words. And remember, and here's the what if, she is on soma. She has swallowed those tablets like Fanny told her to do. She has been conditioned to not understand the concept of marriage, even remotely. And so when John makes these declarations and comes close to kissing her, she decides to take matters into her own hands and makes a sexual advance, which of course disgusts him greatly. He's very bothered by it. And in that moment, he becomes Othello. Remember when Othello gets so frustrated in Act 4 with Desdemona that he strikes her in front of her family member and in front of everyone? Here we have a different act of violence. He slaps her very hard across the back of her shoulder, like kind of clips her as she's walking away from him in fear. He is verbally abusing her, calling her strumpet, just as Othello calls Desdemona a strumpet. And he is very, very offended by her sexual advance in response to his declarations of love. So, the what if is, would this proposal have gone differently if Lenina is sober in this moment? If she's an alpha and she's able to comprehend things a little bit more, if John doesn't become Othello and default to some of his conditioning or everything that he's witnessed in terms of savagery in the reservation, how might this go differently? Here we have Huxley bringing to a head the clash of these two different viewpoints, and John being a kind of hybrid of these two worlds with a mom from the utopia and having grown up in the reservation. He's confused. He's really confused. And we're confused with him. And I'm not sure how many of us are comfortable completely forgiving him for his abuse, but certainly his frustration is real. And most of us could imagine if you're declaring in that moment your heart yet again, like he did on his knees with his dad, Father, and here he is, I love you, Lenina, and yet again he's being torn down and pushed away in that emotional sense. And so do we forgive him his frustration? Do we forgive him? And then this chapter, of course, ends with a phone call calling John away to the Park Lane Hospital because clearly something is up with his mom. So we'll see what happens there. But if that phone call doesn't come, I mean, how long does he stand outside of Lenina's bathroom and wait for her to get over her fear? And what ends up happening, I don't know. But certainly Huxley gives us a lot to think about in this text, in this chapter. So what I would like you to do is think about where you think we're going. Make a prediction as to what's going to happen next with this book. And then please just explain in your notes why you think that might be so. So perhaps you want to make a guess, an educated guess about where Lenina and John might be headed, or what's going to happen with Bernard and Helmholtz and these different characters. Mustafa Ahmad has been floating around in the background, censoring texts and noticing things that are happening. Is he going to play a part in these final chapters? We have chapter 14 through 18 remaining in the text, and I'm hoping that they'll be interesting to you and that we'll get a lot out of this as we wrap up this book. So please make sure you complete your notes work along. And if you have any questions, come to office hours or send me an email, and I'm happy to help you. Okay? All in.